having that much in emergency fund allows me to be more aggressive in my investments. So, I try not to have money invested in the stock market that I need in the next 5 years.
Especially if you're young, you really need to get on it and get that money literacy and diversify, because you don't have anything economically helping you out very much.
Inflation going through the roof, personal finances of many people all around the country, all around the world being deeply affected, and unfortunately suffering in ways that are maybe just dire, unfortunately, but we're here to give today on KEAL on this very special episode, amazing insight into your personal finances from the perspective of Joe, who's been on the channel before, and also Jennifer, who's also been a special guest on this channel. Joe comes from more, let's say, the perspective and purview of, he's gotten, I would say, closer to the finish line, in his personal finances, and can, let's say, retire comfortably in a certain aspect. Hopefully the markets don't go too up and down to affect that drastically. And Jennifer, as you will well remember, and we'll include the links for both the interviews in the description, the show notes, and the pinned comments, comes from more of the minimalist point of view on, her life, her lifestyle, and everything else, which I think will be a very great and scintillating conversation from both their perspectives. So welcome, Joe, Jennifer. How are you both today?
Doing well. Thanks so much for organizing this and putting it together. I'm excited to get into it.
Yeah, just fine day here in Indiana, and excited to pass on any information that may help someone.
Yes, thank you both very much. And let's get into it right now. Jennifer, the way, maybe we're filming this particular episode in, what was it, 2022? It's all a blur now since 2020. I don't even know what year it is. But, this year's been, I would say, quite heavy, I think, for a lot of people, especially because how inflation's hit their pocketbook, dramatically in many ways. How have you, and especially with the way you live your life, from this minimalist perspective, how have you kind of pivoted in your own way to be able to still live the life you want, but also keep track really well of your own expenses?
So it's interesting that you say that, because for me personally, the financial side of COVID actually was quite beneficial for me, because at the time I was self-employed. Both my husband and I technically got laid off because I was a realtor. So my industry was just shot dead for a long period of time. And with those stimulus checks and also budgeting very carefully, in addition to housing prices being lower and a couple of other variables, we were able to accumulate enough to be able to put a down payment on a house out of state. Formerly, I'm from California. There's no way you can accumulate 20% of $1 million in just a year. But it's interesting you say, because our finances actually started shaking out to be a lot better due to the original stimuluses of the pandemic, simply because we had enough of a cushion to where we didn't have to use that stimulus for our basic expenses. We had a cushion already allotted for that. So the stimulus just went into our savings for our future goals, which came due. We bought our house in 2021, early 2021. So for us, it was actually beneficial simply because we were prepared for emergency, and we had the ability to be able to do that with budgeting and just being critical with how we spent.
Jennifer, it's great that you actually had the mindset to think in that way, to have an emergency fund, to put something away for a rainy day when it's absolutely necessary and vital, and secure yourself and your family's future when that is on the horizon. So it's great that you've went through that process to think that way and actually do it. And Joe, being in the situation you're in right now, how important was that while you were on your journey to financial freedom, to always have that also in your mind of having an emergency fund, having money there for expenses that may not be expected?
Oh yeah, having an emergency fund is vital. and I've always had one, always paid off my credit cards. We do use credit cards out of convenience. And even in today's economy, when you're buying half your things online, you need a credit card. But absolutely, I never got in a position where I started borrowing at 20% and then 20% again, 20% again. You make this big snowball that you got to manage. Having an emergency fund is huge while you're accumulating. And actually, while Jennifer was talking, I have a massive emergency fund right now. I have 4 years of expenses in what I call bucket one to manage events like a bear market, high inflation. Really, my lifestyle hasn't changed at all due to inflation. The bear market is probably 10 times the effect, but that's more emotional because you see your investments go down. But I'm prepared with 4 years of expenses inside of a emergency fund that is outside of the stock market in things like I bonds and CDs and money markets. I really can't say my lifestyle is changing with the inflation. I've seen this before. I don't panic. That's one of the things about being a little bit older.
Yeah.
You see these events where inflation goes up to 10% and everybody panics. It'll come back down. Let's see, stock market drops by 20%. Oh my gosh, what am I going to do? Well, do nothing. Look at history and how these things come around. So having that buffer of an emergency fund allows me to almost yawn at a 30%, 20% drop in the market and high inflation. Emergency fund makes all the difference.
Well, can I ask you a question? You have 4 years of expenses in liquid money, or is it money that can be liquidized easily? Can be
liquidized. Yes. Okay. Like, for example, I bonds is something that's linked to inflation. I'm making 9.3% on that. If I take it out tomorrow, I will lose the interest on that. You have to keep it in at least a year or you lose all the interest. And then if you keep it longer than a year, they penalize you 3 months of interest. Well, when you're making 9.3, no big deal. There's no penalty if you keep it in for 5 years. So it's very liquid, no risk at all to the principal. It's how much interest you make, and there is a penalty if you take it out under a year. You lose all your interest, keep your principal. Between the second year, third year, fourth year, fifth year, you lose 3 months worth of interest.
Gotcha.
Jennifer, I'm interested to know, based on what Joe's saying there, he's talking about 4 years of, liquid accessibility for paying expenses, the emergency fund, that kind of thing, which that sounds like a lot of money. But,
yeah.
Like coming from your purview and kind of like the way you look at money and through the minimalist sort of frame of mind as well, is that something that you personally strive to as well, as having like a good cushion of expenses in that way? Or are you more focused on like in tangent, like with growing your portfolio, how do you use that dynamic, and what are your personal goals in that capacity for as you look at money in that way?
That's a really good question. And I would say, like most things in life, you have to kind of strike a balance. I currently sit at about 6 months of liquidizable money, not liquid, because sitting in a bank, you don't really accrue much interest with your money just sitting there. But I do have about 6 months, because that's all we could really, at our stage in life, my husband and I, accumulate. 4 years would be a beautiful cushion. Even though I am a minimalist and I try to keep things sort of pared down in my life, I do prepare very much for emergency, just because I've seen so many of them in my life. Being a millennial, there's been quite a few economic catastrophes, starting with 2008, rolling over into some of the economic issues that happened after 9/11. Seeing my parents go upside down on their house, among many other things. And just seeing kind of my parents go through that in my lifetime. And then also COVID, no food on the shelves. People were losing their jobs left and right. So I've always been somebody who's been like anxiously prepared. So, I have supplies for a rainy day in the event of food shortages. I have money for a rainy day in the event of issues there. And I think that's something that I will continue to do while simultaneously diversifying what I can. I think right now, the mindset, since we're young, is a little bit more high risk. So we have that 6-month cushion. And then everything else, we're trying to diversify our income. We want to buy investment property. We have money in stocks, bonds, et cetera. I think once we grow a bit more of those revenue streams, I would like to build a year or two of liquid money to be able to cushion. But I think as it stands right now with my current knowledge, 2 years would probably be my cap. And that's me conceptualizing having investment property as well in case somebody can't make rent, being able to pay that mortgage, which is, I think 2 years is already like a pretty lump sum. So that's probably where I'd cap it off and then just continue to grow revenue streams from there. And as much as I am like a minimalist and I enjoy simplifying, I also think that money is an important tool in life and money literacy is really important. And sometimes that does mean it's a little bit more complicated. So instead of just having your check hit your account and then you pay your bills and you put the rest in savings, that would be very simple, but you're not going to be eating much more than ramen by the time you're retired. So it gets a little more complicated, but I do think that that's really important in the society that has been for us today. I also think as a millennial, I have a little bit of a different viewpoint because the cards in a lot of ways, and Joe, I mean, I don't know your situation. I don't even know your age, but I know that for my parents, purchasing property, which is like, a really safe investment in the US, was far less stacked against them than it is for like millennials kind of as a whole in this country, especially now that you see these big corporations buying up all of the inventory to turn it into rentals. So I think, especially if you're young, you really need to like get on it and get that money literacy and diversify because you don't have anything economically helping you out very much.
Jennifer sounds quite astute. Wouldn't you concur there, Joe?
Yeah, absolutely. And some people look at how much I have saved in an emergency fund, and my short answer to that is that's because I can.
Yeah.
I am 58, by the way, but been retired 3.5 years. Having that much in emergency fund allows me to be more aggressive in my investments. Okay. So, I try not to have money invested in the stock market that I need in the next 5 years, because you could run into a bear market. Sometimes they last 3-4 years, and you could stack them up. So it allows a lot of peace. I'm not wanting to go back to work full time. I could right now. As I get older, pushing 70, for instance, I really won't want to go back to work. I'm allowed to have that peace. Like I said earlier, when a bear market happens and the stock market goes down by 30-40%, a lot of people panic. A lot of people call me up and want, what are you doing, Joe? What are you doing? And I say, nothing. I'm on vacation. I'm retired. That allows you to smooth out all the market stuff and have the long-term growth. And allows me not to alter my lifestyle every single month. Hey, the stock market's down 5%. Okay, Lisa, let's start buying ramen noodles, and it just allows me to buffer that. I know that 4 years is high. And when I say 4 years, there's a little more detail than that. I get a small pension. I have like, $16,000 a year in a pension. I didn't take all income coming in. So between my deferred income and my pension I get, that, that's like 30% of my expenses that's coming in. So I only have to cover 70. and I don't have any debt. So I'm not paying on the house. I'm not paying on the car. I'm not saving for college. I'm not putting money in a 401k. Well, those expenses come down quite a bit. I'm not buying new furniture for my house. I've been buying that for years. So you'd be amazed when your kids move out of your house, how much lower your expenses can go down to.
I love that. I have it because I can't. If I could, sounds like a good idea. I'm thinking, I don't, that's a lot, but good for you. You've been smart for a long time and it's paid off.
That's 32 years. I did a lot of wrong things, but I've been made good income for 32 years. And I'm just kind of having fun now. I'm making a little bit of money, but I really, this is all gravy money. This is all my vacation fund, what I make on YouTube and consulting.
Joe, I want to touch on that really quick. What you're saying a bit before about like writing out the markets, and especially I would say a type of advice for like someone like Jennifer and myself, and just a younger audience is, when they see the market, especially like what happened yesterday, everything was just totally collapsed. It seemed like, would you like advise people like us, for example, just like dollar cost average into our investment portfolio no matter what's going on, or do you take pauses in the way like someone recommend like someone like us invest, or just dollar cost average each and every month by default kind of thing?
Absolutely. If I look at some of the mistakes that I made, I look at, during the great financial crisis, and looking back on it, it looks bad. Being in it, it was horrible. You thought the whole economy was going to collapse. I mean, it was panic. And, I made a couple moves, small moves that I regret with my, went a little more conservative in my 401k, but not much. But absolutely, if I was sitting here in Jennifer's position and I said I had 6 months of expenses and I don't know the rest of your story, if you have a job or whatever, now would be the time. I would probably bring that down to 2 months of expenses and take that 4 months and invest it in the stock market. Historically, what happened is this yesterday is stocks just went on sale 5%. Now, if you're 55 and 65, you're like, oh my gosh, my nest egg just went down 50%. Mm-hmm. But you have to think of it as a sale. This is a big opportunity to take some of that, take a little more risk and say, hey, okay, I'm going to go down to 2 months of a nest egg. Hey, I could always get a job and work a little bit more. I can get a weekend job doing something. But this is millionaires are made in bear markets. And this is what happens is, guys like Warren Buffett take tens of millions of dollars and buy stock when they're on sale 30%.
I was thinking the stocks are on sale. That's something I was just talking about with my husband recently. That we actually, after this interview, not after this interview immediately, but later tonight, we're going to have a conversation about. But yeah, the stocks are on sale. That's it fans their butt.
What's hard to do, and this is what I did during the great financial crisis and other bear markets, just stop looking at your 401k. Stop looking at your 401k balance. Just don't look at it. It
makes you sad.
Just move on. And you got to think of it. And in reality, you're not fooling yourself by saying they're on sale. They actually are on sale. 100% of the time that the stock market has dropped, it has returned. It's not a promise for the future, but it's a pretty good track record. So they are on sale right now. And you look fast forward 3 years, you'll be kicking yourself for not trying to put more in the stock market when they're down in price.
Very interesting. But this is a question for both of you right now, and I'll start with you, Jennifer. And the question is, maybe it's twofold actually. Like, when did you actually start taking, let's say, your personal finances seriously, like make it conscious the way you see money and use money and all that? Was there like a particular point in your life when that happened? And the second part of that question is, do you think like the message, or at least the teaching for people, especially younger people like ourselves, like of consciously living, you could say almost in general, but also related to money in that way, is being taught enough, and maybe why or why not?
Who do you want to answer first?
You first.
Okay, so the second part of that question, no, I don't think financial literacy is being taught enough, generally speaking. And some conspiracy theorists might say that that's by design. I'm not sure if I necessarily believe that or not. But I do think, especially with the way a lot of our systems are set up, I also think that there are people who have even less access than average to gaining enough financial literacy to get themselves out of the hole that they were just handed at birth. You know, there's poverty in this country. And I think if you're in one of those situations, it's even harder to have the time and space or even have the right connections to gain that financial literacy. I do think nowadays, though, with the advent of the internet, it is a little bit easier. You just have to sort of sift through what's real and what's not, which can be a bit tricky. I wish financial literacy, at least even how to like organize and pay your taxes, was taught in school in some way. And I don't know that it ever will be, but no, I don't think it's taught enough. I think most people in my life that I know don't have as much financial literacy as I would hope they would for like friends and family, but it's also kind of taboo to talk about, which is unfortunate. And then what was that first part of your question?
First question is like, when did the importance of the way you see money and how you spend it, save for it, invest it, all that, like when did that become a pinnacle in your life and have that sort of importance of the way you're using it now?
I think that depends how you define importance, because I think right around 2008 and some of the things that I observed in my house, I was in 8th grade at that point. Some of the things that I observed happening to my family after that, and then them never really being able to come back from some of the mistakes that they made, and also just some of the happenstances that happened to them that were entirely out of their control. I think 2008 is where that kind of first got injected into my mind. But then I think when I was working in real estate, I was working with a lot of people who had a lot of money, and I would try to absorb some of the things they did and some of the things they said and some of the things they thought. Because, you know, if you're rich enough to pay all cash for a $2 million house, you're probably doing something right.
100%.
And before personal trainer, before real estate, I was a personal trainer, and the rates for the training that were at this facility were also exorbitantly expensive. So I would talk to people about their job and, you know, what they did and how they did it. And I would just sort of like absorb information. When I started actually implementing the stuff that I knew, I was probably, my first job, I got set up with an IRA. So you could count that at like 17. But I think when I actually started to care and like make moves with my money was right around 21, after having seen my parents and then also absorbed everything I could from rich people. I was ready to put it into action.
Yeah, very interesting. Joe, how about you?
Yeah. The first part of that question, when did I start learning about financial literacy and getting excited about it? I got to say that I was raised this way. My parents were never extravagant with things. You know, they still live in the same house. It's a 800 square foot house with a basement. We drove our cars for 150,000 miles, which was a lot back then. We just weren't showy. I graduated with an engineering degree, and I did something called co-op, which I worked every other semester. So I went out in industry and worked for a semester, and then I went to school for a semester. So it took me 5 years to graduate, and I graduated debt-free. So I graduated with zero. I started working for a company, and they had this thing called a 401k with a 6% match. So I said, that sounds like return on my money. So I just put money in there and then went on with life. I, had 4 children. And then, that was 22. And then when I was about 30, that money started to accumulate. And then I started making moves within my 401k. I was, the company I worked for actually had cyclical stock market pricing, and you could almost set your watch by it, and I was making 30, 40, 50% return in a year, buying low and selling high inside the business I was in. So I've started saving that 6%. And with every raise I got, heck, this is more money than I've ever had. I would take my wife and kids, whatever kids I had at the time, we'd go out to dinner. Hey, I got a promotion, got a raise, and everything else. I just went to 7%, went to 8%, and I worked that up to, I was putting away like 21% of my income within a few years and didn't look back. So that's, I really was born into a family that was frugal. We weren't cheap. We went on vacations, but when we went on vacations, we camped. We didn't go out to eat. I've been to Yellowstone as a kid, been to Florida, but we went in a camper and stayed, that was just how we did things. So I thank parents. But the question around financial education today, it is infinitely, that's 3 infinitely's, easier today than it was when I was young to learn about financial literacy. You have YouTube, the internet. I'm telling you, you had none of that. You had nobody talking about it. There were no books on it. You had no idea what was going on with other people. And now, I challenge people in any walk of life, any poverty level, rich, on the economic scale. If you've got 15 minutes in a day and access to the internet, you can start to hear stories about saving, investing in yourself, being frugal with your money, not getting trapped into buying new cars when you can't afford one, not getting house poor, all those kind of things. It's so much easier now. That is, to me, access to information is infinitely easier now.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah, go ahead, Jennifer.
So I have a question for your perspective, because I agree, like I said, that access to information is far easier than it's ever been. I also think that there are a fair amount of disadvantages with regards to the youth of America right now, probably even younger than me, like Gen Z, with regards to inflation and wages not keeping up with inflation, student loan debt being way more than it ever used to be. You used to be able to work a job and get out of school debt free, and now that's literally not possible. People are exiting college and having a more difficult time finding a job, so that they have even more of a difficult time paying off that degree that they bought. And it's not impossible. Obviously, plenty of people make it happen. And with that literacy and enough grit, I do believe most people can make it happen. But I am curious to your point of view of the situation for a lot of young people right now with the cards just stacked against them. What advice do you have regarding that?
I don't see a lot of what you're talking about. I'll be honest. I really, one of the sore spots with me is the topic of student loans. If you want to go to a college and borrow $100,000 to get a $30,000 job, that's a mistake.
Mm-hmm.
You can go to a community college, a local college, work part-time, and you can get out almost debt free. You can. I've seen it. I've got friends and neighbors that do that. The problem that I see is universities have turned into a business. They'll give you a degree in whatever you want to study. If you go into college thinking of it as an investment, you make different decisions.
Mm-hmm.
Nobody, would you loan somebody money? If they say, hey, I want to borrow $100,000 and I have the ability to pay it back in 30 years. And you're like, what? That's crazy. So you pick the right major that has a good return on it. Now, I know everybody can't be an engineer, but hey, there are good community colleges that you can get a degree while you work, and you're paying $5,000 a year for that. So that's quite a bit what's going on. You look at the tailwinds right now. Unemployment is like 3.5%. Well,
Yeah.
let's take 15% inflation and put 10% unemployment on top of it. Now you got trouble. So I don't see the disadvantage that kids are under right now. I think the employment area is huge. I think the education around finances is horrible, but it doesn't have to be. The access is there. You can just put it into YouTube and you can get it.
Mm-hmm.
My kids didn't take out student loans. They didn't take out loans. But the kids that took out loans spent money far more freely than my kids did because, hey, I got my student loan check. And then also they graduate and they go buy a new car. Well, why not buy a $3,000 car? Buy a Toyota Camry, nice, reliable car. No, I went to school. I want to get a car. I want to buy this $47,000 car. Okay, you got a $47,000 car. You owe $100,000 on your student loan, and you got a $35,000 a year job. Don't be a victim. Those were choices.
It's interesting because what I think from what you're both saying is really important because on the one hand, like when you're younger, like you're always curious and you're always wanting to grow and find that thing for you, right? Mm-hmm. And I think between that and that coalescence with what like most people do when they finish high school, like are usually driven to college and where they're going to go, that kind of thing. I don't know. I think like when you're just so young, like don't know still what you want to do in life.
Oh yeah.
What you want to study.
That's very common.
Yeah. And
I probably talked to 50 people that are 15, 16, 17, 18, 19 years old.
Yeah, exactly.
Parents will call me because their child won't listen to them for some reason. And they'll call me and we'll start talking about career. It's very hard to decide what you want to do. I've actually used to bring people out to my employer and just, do a job shadowing. Job shadowing is the number one thing to do that I found to find out what career you want to do or not want to do. I had a lot of people I was trying to introduce to engineering. They say, I absolutely don't want to do this. Okay, great. Okay, you know that. Box that off. Go down some other stream. Yeah, it is very hard to decide. I started working with my kids when they were very young. I would tell you about the age of 5, I started working with my kids on, saving money, investing, money traps, cars. We've talked about cars before. That is a sinkhole of money.
Yeah, for sure.
If you do cars right, for 30 years, you'll have $1 million in the bank.
Yeah.
If you just buy a new, I was talking to a guy earlier today that buys a new car every year because he wants to. And I'm like,
yikes.
That's what I said. I was holding my head. I said,
yeah.
I can't even envision that. Cars are such a trap. And, hey, go on this vacation. You only live once. Delayed gratification is a serious problem in the world. Mm-hmm. In the United States is I want that new TV. I want it now. I don't care if I have to pay high interest for it. I worked with one client that took out a loan. I'm serious. Took out a loan to buy a dog and said, it's not a problem because I only make one payment a year. And I'm like, what? You only make one payment a year? That's really not a big expense. He looked at it and he was paying 27% interest. But only after because he wanted the dog now. And
wow.
Oh yeah. Yeah. When you dive into the details, there's a lot of poor decisions, I'll say. And yeah. Just one of them. You don't go to college just because it's an investment. You don't go just to go. Now, 40, 50 years ago, if you had a college degree, you got a good job. Now that doesn't mean anything. You might, what about becoming a welder? What about a machinist? What about, getting some technology like robotics? There are great jobs out there, and you got to look at return on investment. I would not go to a private college to study art. I would not do that. That's not that is you wanting to study art, and then you have $200,000 in loans and you can't get a job and want the government to bail you out. I really think, I don't have the answer to that, but I thought for years that the universities, when you signed up for a major, they should have a form that they force you to, or not force you to sign, but you need to sign and say, hey, when you get this degree, it's going to cost you $250,000 to get this degree, and the average salary for people with this degree is $42,000 a year. You realize
that would be good. That would be good, because I do think also a huge part of the issue with student loan is the way that these agencies prey on the ignorance of 17-year-olds. So I do think that would be a good idea. Also, you were talking about dog, and it made me think. I have a financial loophole if you happen to own your own business like I do and you have a dog. I work from home, and I am training my dog to guard my home and therefore guard my business, making most of his expenses a business expense. So there's always ways. And it's funny, I told my dad that, who's, an honest man, and he was like, that sounds like a scam. And I'm like, hey, don't hate the player, hate the game. The loophole's there, well, I'm not evil for using it.
You've obviously educated yourself. You're far beyond the average person in their 20s. I'm assuming you're in your 20s that has a financial literacy and a plan.
That's kind. Thank you.
Their long-term plan is, what am I going to do this weekend? And that's changed in the last 25, 30 years. Whenever I started working my initial job, I actually literally thought, hey, I may work this for 30 years and save and retire in my 50s. That was my plan when I started working. And I remember a conversation with one of my children, my son. He said, Dad, your generation's different. You guys think a lot about saving and retirement. My generation doesn't think about that. I say, yeah, you don't think about that when you're 22. Wait till you're 52. It's not that and I don't want to give the impression at all that I hated my job. It was, I retired because I wanted to start a new journey. I loved what I did. I was just like, hey, I could do this. I can keep doing this another 5 years, or I can take another path. And I wanted to choose another path because I wasn't locked into choosing my career because of money. I forget about money. What do I want to do? What impact do I want to have on the world? What impact do I want to have on others? Without money being a consideration, you make different choices.
I want to touch on that point right now and make it my last question for each of you, because we ran out of time, unfortunately. And I really want to go into a part 2 in the future, because there's like 4 or 5 other themes I think really important to speak with you both, but we'll find another opportunity for that. Speaking of from a last question for each of you, like what you were saying, Joe, and we'll take it with Jennifer first, this question. How do you envision your life, Jennifer, in like some future, like with the way that you're living intentionally now, right? Like, how are you living in such a way now that you want to see yourself in a certain future? And what does that look like? Whether it's the way you use money, like your lifestyle, everything else, how do you envision that for your future? And Joe, like as well, like let's say in the next 10, 15 years, like what is it that is driving your purpose and your future destination coming up in these, next decade? Go ahead, Jennifer.
So my goal overall is to be kind of where Joe is, a little bit beyond comfortable just with like the basic expenses, and have that diverse income stream to be able to retire early and kind of have my life path be more meaningful. I've chosen work right now where it's hopefully already meaningful to people, but I do think that that's like a big part of the human experience, is to work to live rather than live to work. So I would hope for my future to be at a point of comfort where I can make all my payments, but also beyond comfort, maybe with 4 years of cushion, to where I'm not so anxious about always making the right moves. I'm more not liberal is not the right word. I'm just more comfortable, I think, generally speaking. And then as far as, I didn't even get to talk about minimalism or like frugality or intentional living.
We'll do it in the part 2, Jennifer. We ran out of time, but I wanted to say that for the next one. Yeah.
No worries. But basically, the way I spend money now is also, I think, kind of unique due to my more minimalist lifestyle. I'm just kind of more intentional and cognizant, which allows me to have more money to then be riskier with in like the stock market or whatever. But yeah, I would hope my future looks similar to Joe's. Maybe not 4 kids for me. But yeah, that's, I guess, where I hope I'm headed.
That's excellent. And you, Joe?
Yeah, my wife wanted 5 kids and 6 kids, but and don't. Yeah, that's not a financial decision. To have, not a good one. Rather, I'm on a couple journeys right now, and I'm having fun. I retired because I wanted to do some consulting with reliability and maintenance, taking care of companies that have massive assets and they have to maintain those. I developed an expertise in a unique way of dealing with those that is different from the norm. So I retired to kind of evangelize in that space. That's why I started my YouTube channel. I do some speaking. I get paid to speak at conferences. I do some, I said consulting. I do some audio consulting. I do some mentoring in that space. And then that is spilled over into retirement. I get a lot of people that, what are you doing retired? So how did you retire? So I have 20 times the viewership on retirement than I do in reliability maintenance. But that's one journey I'm on, is trying to, be an evangelist on reliability maintenance, how to do it differently. There's a lot of pain in that space with people's lives that can be better, and companies and communities can be better. I also like to travel. My wife and I like to travel. We have kids all over the country. We like to visit them. That's a little journey that I'm on. I'm also president of a nonprofit improving our parks in my local town. That's a journey I'm on. I'll tell you, probably 5 or 6 years from now, I'll be on 3 different journeys. I don't know what they are. I'm trying to make an impact, trying to help people, doing what I love doing on a very flexible schedule, and I'm picking these things where I can have an impact that's not driven by money. It's nice making a little money. I make money on YouTube and consulting, but it's nice, but it's not what drives me. So I expect to be on 3 or 4 different journeys 10 years from now. The last thing I'll say, if I can throw in one more thing, much more health conscious, much more. I exercise more and eat a lot better, whole foods. I've lost, right now I'm down about 37 pounds from when I retired. Much better shape. The doctor says I'm the healthiest patient that he has. So when you retire and you stop thinking about money, you stop chasing, that dream, you start thinking about, oh my gosh, I want to be retired for 30, 40 years. I sure like those to be healthy years. So you start your health, a big swing in what I focus on. I don't really focus too much on money in my investments. It's something that I think about once a quarter, 3 or 4 times a year.
It sounds like you've built your wealth enough to where now your time is your most valuable asset. And I think that's really inspiring.
Absolutely. Time becomes your number one asset. No question.
Yeah.
I'm so grateful for the insights from you both. I think this was just such an incredible conversation, very dynamic, very just pointing at such important issues and, looking at where things are, where you're going and everything else. So thank you both so much. Jennifer, where can more people find out about you, your work, connect with you and everything you're doing?
Yeah, so I am on TikTok. I was at Jennifer.Lynn.Life. Instagram is the same. And then YouTube is just Jennifer Lynn, and that'll be linked down below. And over on my platforms, I talk about simple living, a little bit of money management, sustainable living, minimalism, but in kind of a realistic way. So if any of that interests you, I'll catch you over there for some of that content.
Excellent. And you, Joe?
I'm at Joe Kuhn, JoeKuhn on YouTube. One thing I will add is Jennifer is ahead of where I was at age. So I'm expecting you, Jennifer, to retire about 45, 48 years old. So I'm yeah, seriously, you're ahead of where I was at that time.
I hope so. I hope so. I look at how much I need to retire and it's overwhelming. So thanks for that.
Well, we know whose door to knock on for Thanksgiving when she gets to that point. I'm sure to remember what she's doing around that time of year. So Jennifer, Joe, I thank you both so much. Very grateful. This was an excellent conversation. And we will include both Jennifer and Joe's information in the show notes, the description, the pinned comments everywhere as we usually do. We'll see you on the next episode and a future part 2 with both our guests. Have a great day, everyone.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye.